Hi everyone, Chris here for 207, and we're up to the Architecture Week. Hopefully those of you with kids, or potentially grandkids, having a good school holidays. I know that it's organised chaos at my place, and it's a case of kick the child out of the house as often as possible to go and see the grandparents. So that I can actually get some work done. But hey, such is life. But hopefully, with the 2 weeks that you've got to do most of your assignments, it's not quite as bad as it could have been. Certainly not as bad as it used to be when it was an assignment due every week for most of the other courses. Anyway, enough chatter. Just really quickly, those of you in the Wellington region, you may want to pop in to see the Odlin Gallery, which is on until this weekend, i.e. the 9th. That's in Lower Hutt, and it's my Camera Club's exhibition, and you're more than welcome to pop along and have a look. Yeah, it's one of those interesting ones where club members can put in pretty much anything that they like. It's not hugely curated, so there's a very large range of skill sets. Not that you can tell, some of the beginners are very good. Anyway, let's get stuck into this assignment, and Justin, you're first up. And I'll just work through things as normal. So the first thing I noticed when I was flicking through these images was, well, there's two things. One is your set dressing and the other is your exposure. And unfortunately neither are particularly great. Your exposure, you shouldn't be having burnt out highlights. You should be working out either increase the amount of lighting inside or look at doing HDR. And the other one is the set dressing, things like making sure that I believe that's a backdrop for a photography studio, is tucked out the way and popped down, as is making sure that the dishes are out of the sink. And often with this type of thing, if you're in somebody else's house, it's simply a case of moving it to the next room, taking the photo of that place, and then putting it all back again. Exterior shot, that's obviously not an issue with, but your exposure still is. We've lost those highlights from the other part of the building, and the same with the bed. And this part of the image here is reasonably well sorted. This area here, definitely still needed to be tidied up, and if you can do that, then things start coming together again a bit more. Most of these images you've got a vertical in there that's right, but you've not done any lens correction, and it's not always the main vertical that you've set as the vertical. This one actually doesn't have anything in it because you've got that divergence. This one, it's this line here that is straight, but this one has a bow in it due to the lens barrel distortion. Whereas it would be this one that I'd expect to be straight, because it's the strongest contrast one and the one closest to the camera. Similar with this one. Which one did you have that was straight in here? It's pretty much that back window one is the closest to being vertical, whereas it's one of these two that would have made a lot more sense to have straightened up. Oops, overcooked it. There we go. But again, still needs some lens correction in there. So unfortunate on that point. And in terms of release forms, yes, you uploaded a release form, but it wasn't filled in, or at least it didn't look like it was filled in on my version, which is not particularly much use. The idea is you're getting in practice of filling these things in and submitting them, so that you're comfortable with doing it when you need to do it with a client. Right, Haley, let's have a look at yours, and most of them are behaving themselves reasonably well. There's a couple of glitches with exposure. This one you've exposed quite nicely for the exterior, but it's not really bright enough inside. Now, you can play around with your exposure functions within Lightroom just to lighten everything up a little bit more, but on Camera Flash bouncing or a flash bouncing up at the ceiling would help that. And composition wise, the cot is just a little bit in the way. I think I'd actually probably get rid of it entirely. And the bathroom one, you've got this massive shadow that's being cast on the window, and kind of looks a little bit weird, potentially freaky. It kind of looks like a barbecue cover or something, and it would have been worth just pulling it out the way so that it's a nice clean window against. The rest of the images, there's not too much clutter on them. Those flowers I would probably move to this end of the table because they would have fit in the composition quite nicely here rather than being blocked by the chairs. And although you've recovered your highlights on here, they were overexposed and you've not actually managed to recover those far enough, so you actually needed to do something like HDR to actually be able to push those to a point where it's going to give you a nice image. And yeah, obviously there's not as much light inside as there is out, even though you've got the lights on. It could have been improved from that point of view. Your external shot is lacking a little bit of contrast and a little bit of brightness. These walls look like they're supposed to be white, and so just pushing that up a little bit more, potentially a little bit more clarity, and yeah, I think you overcook the vibrancy at some point in the post-production. But yeah, that's an interesting balance to get that one behaving itself. If I hit reset, you can probably see what I mean. It's quite a bit darker than it needs to be for this version. It would have been nice if you'd sorted out all of the walls. There's at least one in each image that is vertical, which is fine, but you've got that software there, so actually sorting out all of the verticals so that they actually look vertical certainly wouldn't do the images any harm. The flow of images is good, and you've got your release form filled out correctly and sent in, which is good to see. Right, Christina, well, first challenge I have is I can't open your real estate release form. So if you'd like to flick that to me, probably via email is the best option this time. It's not actually, it's part of the rubric, but it's not got a grade attached to it. But yeah, I don't know why it's not behaving itself, but I can't view it on Blackboard or download it. In terms of the images, given you've got a really horrible day to deal with, I'm not really sure why you would have used two exterior shots. Also, there's a massive colour balance difference between these two. This house looks grey, this one looks yellow. I don't know if you've clicked on here with your color balance and it's just pushed it the whole way across, but you want to be really careful with that you're actually showing what's what it's supposed to look like, really. And given that it's not a great day, having two exterior shots is not a good idea at all. In fact, what you should be doing is going back to it another day when the weather's behaving itself, and catching one where you actually are presenting the house in the best light. In terms of the technical stuff, there is that color balance issue. Other than that, it's fine, and you've managed to get your verticals mostly there. That wall's vertical. This one, however, hasn't been corrected, and you could have gone through that with the correction program that you got in Photoshop. This one you've used an on-camera flash, which is not a great idea because you can see all the shadows and reflections off the metallic surfaces. If you need more light, you need to actually bounce that light. Even if it's the on-camera flash, you diffuse it and bounce it around the room rather than having it coming straight out of your camera, because of that reflection issue that you end up with, which is rather unfortunate. Other than that, I mean, you've dressed the house really nicely, or correction, you've found a house that has been dressed really nicely. Going and using an open home, a show home is quite a sensible option from that point of view. It means you don't have to do the cleaning and tidying. Which is not a silly idea for it. And the only downside is that the pantry looks empty, given that it's not full of stuff. But yeah, 6 of one, half a dozen the other. I think if the pantry was full of stuff, I'd probably be saying shut the door because it's a distraction. But then you don't actually show how big the pantry is, and there is a trade-off between the two there. Right, Casey, let's have a look at yours. Now, you mentioned that you had an off-camera flash that you were using to add light in here. I'm not seeing any evidence of that flash actually firing or being particularly bright. I'm wondering if you've actually got it working and behaving itself. It doesn't seem to be. It would have been quite a good idea to use, and even if you hadn't used it, you could have done some extra post-production to fix some of the issues that arose. One of them is just a general lightening of your images. In this case, increasing exposure, just making sure the highlights stay about the same, and lifting the shadows. Now, this has the downside of it being quite noisy. In your raw files, you may well be able to eliminate some of that, and this one would have been good to increase the brightness of. And you've got a bit of chromatic aberration in your lens, which is reasonably easy to fix. Go into your lens correction, remove chromatics, click on the bit that's the offending colour fringe. Oh, there we go. And there should be a purple version there as well, and we can get rid of that. Don't know if it's going to let me do that. There we go. That's not too bad. It certainly reduces the amount that was there. And yeah, it doesn't look like it's caused any problems. So yeah, there's a little bit more fine-tuning to do from that point of view. If you're firing your off-camera flash, then make sure that you're actually using it on manual, because that gives you full control over what's actually going on. I want to grab Show and Explorer and see if I can grab the file, which is... that's not going to help, is it? There we go. No, I want one of the indoor ones, Properties, Details, and you're shooting on manual, so that's good. So yeah, but make sure your flash is also on manual, not on TTL through the lens metering, because your flash probably looked at this image and went, it's close enough to being properly exposed, therefore I won't fire, or I won't fire very much. Whereas if you're actually trying to get it to bounce off the ceiling behind you and flood the room with light, then yeah, that can be a bit difficult to achieve unless you're in full manual. And you haven't uploaded the release form, which is unfortunate. Right, Natasha, let's have a look at yours. And nice day for that exterior shot. That's working quite well. This interior one, I've noticed you mentioned in your brief that you've used a speed light, and you can see it on that window. What you really needed to have done was turn the speed light round so it faced behind you, and it would give you a much more diffuse light throughout the whole room, and then you don't get these shadows off here. You're much less likely to get a reflection. And you can still pump out enough light to fill the rest of the room up. This one here, I'd say you haven't used the speed light on at all. A, we've not got that telltale on the reflection, but B, the overall exposure is a little bit more reduced. Now maybe you have, because you've filled in the light here. In fact, on second thoughts, I'd say maybe you have, and you've bounced it this time. So not catching that corner of the wardrobe would have been good. getting rid of the books and flattening out the bedclothes so it doesn't look like the cat's just slept on it, as my cat has a habit of doing. Just that last bit of set dressing, and although you've recovered the highlights in there, it would have been nice to see a bit more of the actual sky there. And this one probably would have gone for a bit more of an angle looking through and getting these shelves, as rather than necessarily the red of the wardrobe, because that's grabbing my attention. Potentially you could have swung it around so that this was the main focal point, but it's nice to see that you've actually got showing the dressing room part of things, but also the fact that you've got a bidet, which some people will be looking for in a house, which is nice to show off that difference. Yep, and as you said, you were right to open up the shadows and reduce the highlights, because it makes it easier to look through the image, and actually explore and see what's a part of the house, and all your verticals are behaving themselves, which is good to see. A little bit of a lean on here that you could have opened up a little bit more, but in general it's not too bad. Right, Carolyn, I was going to ask where this one was, but I looked at the release form, and of course it actually tells me it's Glenorchy. And I really like the fact that you thought about a huge selling point of this house is the view out of the windows, and so you've made sure that that's a key feature by dropping down that a little bit lower. Particularly with this image, I think you could have pulled your highlights back a little bit more just to allow us to see out that window, and maybe let's pull the clarity up a little bit just so that you actually get a little bit more of that impact of the landscape, but I'm doing it selectively, so it's just the trees and the mountains that are adding to that. Your exterior shot is really nice, and you've even got the mountains in the reflection, which I think is a very nice little trick there. And this one, although it's an exterior shot, you've got that indoor-outdoor flow, and it's not a repeat of the same area by any means. So yeah, well done. Very nice, and yeah, the HDR side of things is definitely behaved itself from that point of view. That's good. Right, Livon, let's have a look at yours. And so we'll start with the exterior shot. It's a little bit unfortunate that you've overcooked the recovery of the sky. You don't want it to look a brooding, moody photograph in an advertising shot. It wants to look nice and sunny, but at the same time not blown out. So there is a balancing act to, or a line to walk on that. I think you've gone a little bit too far on that. Also, with this shot and this shot, they're a little bit too similar. But there's also a major color cast shift between the two. You can see that you've gone from a nice red brick to something that looks quite orange and flat. And so you've got to be careful that you keep your color balance the same between the two shots. But more importantly, this shot doesn't add a huge amount to the image compared to this one. What I would have been tempted to do is come over this way and shoot across so that you can actually see the hot tub without the fence in the way, rather than shooting this shot and having it as an additional. I would have also played around with your plants. These three are looking a little bit worse for wear. Those daffodils are looking really nice, so put the daffodils in the foreground and potentially get rid of the other ones. Not easy to lift, and if it's not your place then you have to ask permission, but it is part of that set dressing. And if the hot tub's going to be a big feature, it might even be worth taking off the cover and the dehumidifier heat pump system looks like it's seen a little bit of better days, so those plant pots might well have gone in front of it. Just, you don't have to show people that that needs replacing, or potentially is going to be a replacement thing right from the start. You want to get people to get in the door, fall in love with the place, and then they can realize what they've got to fix. Cropping it out, or sorry, cloning it out and fixing it in Photoshop, of course, is a no-no. But if you just block it by obscuring the view, then it's not totally illegal. With this one, again, the set dressing, there's more stuff that could have been moved out and tidied up. I think those flowers would have worked quite nicely on the box, but without the other photographs and other bits and pieces around, and just straighten things up. Have some more light inside so that you can actually see some of that view. And the kitchen shot, I'm wondering whether or not actually you could have shot the kitchen facing this way into the lounge and included the two pieces to connect them, and potentially even the outside door. You're shooting on 18mm, which means that you've not got a huge amount of room to play with if you don't have another lens, but you could have stitched them in Photoshop. With this one, set dressing wise, the windowsill's looking quite cluttered, and there's a few bottles and stuff down here that could have been moved out of the way to just give that sense of space in the image before you actually take the shot. And release form is all good. Right, Michelle, let's have a look at yours. And your exterior image, lovely time of day, but you've pushed that colour saturation quite a bit, so that the grass is starting to look quite fake. You need to be careful that you don't push it that far, and you've got some... Let me zoom in a little bit closer so I can actually show you. You've got some issues here down the bottom, and here where there are cloning bits in on there, and no, you can't do that type of cloning because it is false representation. What you can do is move yourself so that the actual piece of the shot is not there, or you can crop. There is nothing stopping you cropping into there and just having that piece of the grass removed. But cloning stuff out, nope, that's not going to go down well with clients, especially when they work out that something has been done. This one here, unfortunately, you've blown out your exterior piece, and although the highlight clipping warning isn't whinging at you, there's no detail in there. So keeping going with that process of HDR and actually giving yourself that visibility to be able to see both the interior and exterior still needs a bit more work. This one's working quite nicely. I'm liking the leading lines into the table. You can bring the fruit bowl into the middle of the table so it's feeling that it's set and placed nicely. This one here, this one I think you've done some HDR on, and unfortunately you can't do HDR on things that move. In this case the cat has wiggled, and so you've got a halo around it, a bit of a halo around the bed. This patch here is looking alright, but this is blown out, so yeah, if you've been doing HDR it's not really behaved itself. And yeah, you need a bigger bracket, but you can't have the cat in the shot because of course they move. And by the way, if you're doing stuff like this and you're unsure whether or not you can or should do that type of editing, you can always email me. That's what I'm here for. If you haven't been able to find it in the readings and the material you've been given and you're unsure about something, then please make sure you actually email me and ask me. I'm usually pretty good about getting back to people within a day or so. But yeah, putting those questions on your submission is not a good idea, because if it's wrong, it's too late, and I still have to mark you down for it. You actually need to ask those questions earlier. Right, Michael, let's have a look at yours. And the first thing that I'm running into is your exposure is quite a way off. This is your shot, and this is closer to what I expect you should have been getting in terms of exposure. Same with this one and this one. You can see there's a very large shift in that histogram. Yes, you don't want to have blown out highlights, but at the same time you want the rooms to feel bright and airy and nice for people to be in. In terms of tidying up, you've got the basic tidying up done, but the next stage is to actually do a bit of scorched earth policy, i.e. things like the fan, pull it out of the room, get rid of it, clear DVDs and stuff away, hide the cables. And part of that might just be the angle that you shoot on. Make sure the bedding's nice and straight and tucked in at the edges. Get rid of the squeegee and the shampoo that's sitting on the top of the shower, and clean this down to just something that looks pretty rather than having things that are potentially cluttered. The angle that you've shot for the bathroom works quite well. It gives you that sense that you can actually see what's going on in there, but straighten the blinds up so that they are all nice and even. With this one here, it looks like you've got a nice patio setting here, so you've got chairs and a table outside and maybe a barbecue. Open the curtains, let the light in, turn all the other lights on in the room, and make sure that your exposure for both is balanced. For the one in the kitchen, the pretty much opposite applies. It's not a nice view where you're looking out onto, it's somebody else's house, so pull the blinds and then light the rest of the room up really well. Make sure that the doors and drawers are shut. Tea towels and stuff neatly folded, bills and all the photographs that are on the fridge, pull them off. Remember, you're trying to make sure that this house is as easy for somebody else to see themselves in as possible, and so by removing any personal items, it just means that people can actually look at it and go, oh, I can see myself living there, much more easily than if they've got to then mentally pull those objects out before they can move in. This one needs a bit of a straighten to get that window straight, and at the same time I would crop down so that you lose whatever's up the top of the shelving units. Of course, the easier option is to remove the plastic boxes. If you've got stuff that's there, it's immediately showing that it's cluttered and that there's not as much storage space as you necessarily want, which is a put off to some people, whereas if they can see that everything's away and it's got its place, that feeling of lack of space isn't as apparent. Release form though is spot on, so well done on that one. Right, Leighton, now that's an interesting series of shots. I'm really liking the lighting that you've got for these images, and you've opened up the shadows so they're well exposed. I think would have been really nice if you opened up the doors. This one here particularly, you've got the chairs, deck chairs here, where you've got indoor-outdoor flow potential, and the doors are shut. It's just cracked open ajar, whereas opening both of them up would have given you that sense of actual flow. And you're only on a 24mm lens, aren't you, which is as wide as that one will go. You probably needed to do some stitching so that you can actually get the whole of the room in, because you've ended up in a number of points where you've chopped off a key point, i.e. in this case the chairs here, in this one here the chairs on this side, and again door open so you can actually flow through from one to the other. Kitchen's looking quite nice. Not sure that the blinds are necessarily great from the fact that they cast that broken up shadow on there, but I can live with that. But again, with the crop, you've chopped off the corner of the cupboards and the cup holder, whereas compositionally it would be nice to actually have those the whole way included. Or potentially, if you really can't fit them in and can't take a step further back, then move them off the bench, so that they're no longer actually in the shot. But certainly you've got the right idea. I think if you're going to be doing this for a job, and you've certainly got the right idea with them, so that's a potential, you want to invest in a lens that gives you a bit more space to work with. Right, Holly, let's have a look at yours. Now, you mentioned the exterior shot being a bit tricky, because it was a little bit overgrown. I noticed that you've actually got a bench or deck up here. I wonder if that would have actually worked as a better exterior shot, looking along the house and out at the view. This shot here is a bit on the dark side, particularly that you've got overcast shadows in there, and lifting those shadows up, you're going to have to pull the exposure and pull the highlights back so they don't blow out, would help. Yes, it's overgrown. Getting back away from the garden a little bit, and going up and above the garden can also help. It means that the house is going to be more prominent and the greenery less so. Your interior shot, this one, you've got a little bit of lack of detail in the sky, but it's probably the best exposed of the shots that you've got. You mentioned that you lost some of or you had some fun with Photoshop in terms of compensating for the wide-angle lens. And yes, I can see that. Unfortunately, this vase, which I suspect would have been quite nicely composed in the shot, has got a little bit too close to the edge, and clearing off the fridge would have been a good idea as well. Why? Well, in this case, there's a lot of small children type words. Well, when I think of small children, I think that they tend to make a mess of things. So you tend to be looking for damage at child height at that point. And yeah, it plus the obvious option of it makes it slightly harder for people to see themselves in the house. So this one, unfortunately, you've over-recovered that external area, and really to fix this one you should have done an HDR, or high dynamic range shot with the exposure correct outside. Same with this one here. You've got a really nice potential view. Open those windows out and get the exposure there so that people can see what's going on and some of the nice aspects of the property. Right, Rachel, let's have a look at yours, and we'll start with the outside one, shall we? So nice job with the time of day. Nice amount of light on there. I'm of two minds as to whether or not those gates would have been nicer open or closed. The challenge with them being closed is they do make it feel like the house is actually cut off. Being closed, they also add that sense of security. It's 6 of one, half a dozen the other on that one. Lighting on most of the images are okay. This one, you've not quite nailed having the exterior exposed properly. And this one is a little bit dark in this area, close to the camera. It would have probably helped if you'd had the fire lit and the candles lit. That would have been a nice little touch. And you've also got blown out highlights on those exterior pieces, so pull those back and lift your shadows up. Of course, the challenge is you can't lift the shadows too much as your ISO noise starts to become an issue, and you'd have to go back and do something about that as well. So yeah, there's a little bit more balancing that needed to happen there. Verticals, and walls are all nicely straight, which is good, and you've got a good flow of shots between the interior and exterior. This is a pretty good one of the kitchen, and then on the next one we can actually see where the kitchen fits into the lounge, so it gives you that sense of flow around the house a little bit. But yeah, the exposure issues and lighting is a little bit unfortunate. If you do like these ones, then you probably don't need anything on the table, but it would be nice to have a centerpiece on the table here, just like you've utilized the uh, basket of fruit as the centerpiece of the kitchen, which is quite appropriate. And oh yeah, release form, which is spot on, so that's good.